So hi everyone, my name is Michael and I am the gallery manager at the Art Club. I want to thank all of you for being with us tonight for another in our PAC lecture series. For those of you who, like maybe some of you, this is your first time coming to one of our programs. Typically once a month we host an art professional, an artist, a curator, someone from the art community to talk about a project they're working on or research they're doing and stuff like that. And over the last year and a half, we've had a lot of wonderful people come to speak. And going forward, this is one of the first ones that we're doing, but going forward, all of our PAC lectures each month are going to be free, which is exciting. So I hope you'll join us again in the future. So tonight, I'm very pleased to welcome Emily Banas from the RISD Museum, who's joining us to talk about the Works in Process exhibition that she just curated. If you co-curated, if you are in the area, I would highly recommend that you go to the RISD Museum, which is now reopened, and you can see this great show that Emily worked on. Emily is the Assistant Curator of Decorative Arts and Design at the RISD Museum, where she has been working since 2015. Prior to joining the RISD Museum, Emily earned her MA in Decorative Arts, Design History, and Material Culture from the Bard Graduate Center in 2015, and her MA in Art History and Museum Studies at Georgetown in 2012. Her interests span from 18th century decorative arts to 21st century craft and design and everything in between. There will be a question and answer after Emily's presentation, and your questions are very welcome. So please just use the chat function, and you can enter questions at any time during the presentation, and then I'll MC a question and answer with Emily at the conclusion. If you have any trouble with the chat, you can also email me your questions and I'll check my email as we're doing the chat, so I can do them that way as well. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Emily. Thank you again for being with us, Emily. I appreciate it. And now you should be able to share your screen.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Michael, and thank you to everyone for being here tonight and joining me for this talk, which I've entitled Works in Process, William Edgar Brigham. And as Michael said, the idea for this talk came from an exhibition, Works in Process, that I recently co-curated with my colleague, Wai Chung, who is the Associate Curator of Asian Art. And the exhibition presents a range of artworks that demonstrate how ideas and even artworks themselves really develop through the process of creation. So I'm going to show just a few examples from that exhibition of other artists, and then focus mainly on William Edgar Brigham. This is one of the sets of works in the exhibition. We have design drawings that were made by two women, Margaret Whiting and Ellen Miller, who are the founders of the Deerfield Society of Blue and White Needlework. And these drawings were made as a way to document historic textiles that the two saw throughout New England and the Northeast. And it was meant as a way to really preserve the memory of these textiles, which the two women were concerned would not last forever. So they drew these wonderful drawings from these embroideries. And here we have a set of drawings that were made from a textile that was created by a woman named Ruth Culver Coleman. And we have a textile by that same artist in our collection. It probably isn't the exact same textile that Margaret and Ellen were looking at, but Ruth used very similar motifs in her embroideries. So you can see the similarities here in this textile to the drawings. And the drawings contain very detailed notes about the stitches that were used in these historic embroideries. And they were later used as inspiration for new textiles that the Society made in the early 20th century. So we think about these drawings as having different functions, both to preserve the memory of one artwork and also to inspire the creation of another artwork. We also have drawings, designs, and then a wallpaper in this particular set. These were all made by Robert Evans Loker, who was a gay artist and designer working in New York City in the early 20th century. On the left, we have this very classical sketch of a landscape with swans and urns. And we see how Loker's drawing inspiration from that and creating a very modern wallpaper design. The two images in the center are concept drawings for the final wallpaper on the right. And he's really simplified some of the key elements of the design and transformed them into a very modern and streamlined wallpaper. So I won't go into all of the works in the exhibition, but I really hope for some of you who are local, you have an opportunity to come to the RISD Museum and see it in person. This will be on view until, I think, January 22nd of next year. But tonight, I want to focus mainly on William Edgar Brigham, who is one of the artists that we feature in the exhibition. And I think that Brigham is a perfect springboard to talk about process in art. So that's what I want to explore. And this is one of the very few photographs that I've ever been able to find of Mr. Brigham. Certainly, it's the best quality image. And here he stands peering into a very ornate case of objects, all of which he designed and made, and most of which, if not all, are in the RISD Museum today. A talented artist, particularly in the realms of jewelry and metalsmithing, Brigham's name isn't very well known today outside of Providence. And to be honest, I'm not sure that it's even very well known in Providence anymore. Despite his artistic talents and social stature, really little is known about his personal life. But what we lack in written documentation about his life and work, we more than make up for in images, drawings, watercolors, and photographs, as well as the objects that he made and those that he and his wife, Clara, collected and entrusted to the RISD Museum. What we do know about Brigham is that he was born in 1885 in North Attleboro, Massachusetts. And for any of you joining us tonight from away, that is just over the border from Providence. He studied at the Rhode Island School of Design from 1903 to 1907 in what was then known as the Department of Decorative Design. And he probably took classes in the Waterman Building, which you see here on the left, which was the first permanent RISD building built in 1893. An excerpt from the Department of Decorative Design history reads, quote, "In this department, students design surface patterns of all kinds, such as wallpapers, prints, carpets, mosaics, and textiles. They also design furniture, interior and exterior decoration for buildings, stained glass, wrought ironwork, silverware and jewelry, and book covers and page illustrations." So Brigham had a very broad overview, a very broad arts education. And I would say most, if not all of these types of design played a role in his future artistic career. After graduating from RISD, Brigham studied for 2 years at Harvard with painter, art historian, and art collector Denman Ross, whose soft painterly style you see on the left likely influenced Brigham's own works in watercolor, as seen here on the right. And I won't be showing many more watercolors, but we do have quite a few of his landscapes in the collection. Upon finishing his studies at Harvard, Brigham served as the head of the design department at the Cleveland School of Art, which is now the Cleveland Institute of Art. And it was here that he met his wife, Clara Louise Rust, a wealthy socialite and daughter of John Franklin Rust. The two only stayed in Cleveland for a few years before the Brighams returned to Providence in 1913, where William became the head of the Department of Design at RISD, and soon after joined the Providence Art Club. But I will get to that a little bit later. Soon after arriving back in Providence, the Brighams were simultaneously engaged with 2 building projects: their summer home in Southwest Harbor, Maine, and their permanent residence, which some of you locals may be familiar with, at 460 Rochambeau Avenue in Providence. In fact, the Brigham's home is currently for sale and can be yours for a modest $7,900,000. The design of this home was likely inspired by the Brigham's many trips to Europe and is a mix of Spanish and Italian revival style. Sitting on over 3 acres of land, this is probably one of the last true estates in Providence. And I promise this talk is not sponsored by any real estate agent that is selling this house. I found a quote that talked about the Brighams collecting art on their travels and bringing it home to what they called, quote, the little museum that they had built in their home, which could very well have been this space here. And I love to think of the Brighams hanging a mixture of artworks from their travels as well as William's own work here. Some of you may have heard Brigham's name before, or perhaps you've seen this exquisite object in the RISD Museum's collection. This is called the Argosy, and an Argosy is a merchant ship, but this is no ordinary ship. This kind of object is based on a nef, N-E-F, which is an extravagant table ornament or container that was used in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, and would have been made of precious materials in the shape of a ship. Brigham's ship is a miniature showpiece of beautiful materials and refined craftsmanship. The hull is carved of amber. The sails are made of twisted gold wire holding plique jour enamel. There are white and pink pearls, emeralds, and it's all mounted in 16-karat gold, standing less than 5 inches high. You can see on the left what appears to be a design drawing for a very similar object, although the mount and chain at the top may suggest that Brigham had originally been thinking of this as a smaller pendant, but that his idea morphed into a freestanding object. And I think this is really the ultimate expression of art for art's sake, and really a testament to Brigham's skill as a metalsmith, and also a prime example of the types of objects that he drew inspiration from and recreated. I want to pause here to point out that while William was a teacher and department head at RISD, he never really needed to work. Clara's fortune allowed the couple to travel, collect, and above all else, engage in artistic pursuits without really needing to make a living from them. I would say this was both to William's benefit and his detriment. Of course, he could afford the high quality materials and time to craft exquisite objects like this without worrying who would buy them. But we also don't know how much of his work ever really sold. And to my knowledge, it was only exhibited a handful of times. So few people outside of his Rhode Island and Boston circles had the opportunity to collect, study, and write about his work. Although tonight's talk is about William, I don't want to completely ignore his wife, Clara, and leave you with the impression that she was nothing more than a socialite, because Clara was also an artist, and she was very invested as well in the arts community in Providence. While William seemed primarily occupied with jewelry and metalwork, Clara's interest was in textiles, both collecting and producing them. And along with William, she was a member of the Providence Art Club, the Handicraft Club, Boston Society of Arts and Crafts, and she was the founder and first president of the Weavers Guild in Providence. Together, the Brighams founded an organization they called Villa Handcrafts, and it was run out of their home at Rochambeau Avenue. It may have been more of Clara's pursuit than William's, as it's always her name that appears on the roster of handicraft groups wherever Villa Handcrafts is listed. The image on the right was included in an article in 1944 in Craft Horizon magazine, which featured several affiliate craft groups from around the country. And the information about Villa Handcrafts reads, quote, "We are the Villa Handcrafts, are a small group. To be exact, there are 4 members so far, with a studio in Providence, Rhode Island. Though we are few in number, our interests and activities are many. We work at jewelry, metalwork, ironwork, weave tweeds, rugs, bedspreads, and upholstery material, and build our own looms and gadgets, and are particularly interested in experimenting with various materials." And what's funny is that underneath this blurb, an editor wrote, "We feel that this account of the Villa Handcrafts is too modest. Evidently, their correspondent does not care to blow their own trumpet. Though few in number, the quality of their output of 4 members is set so high a standard, and we are so proud to have them with us. I don't have much additional information about the Villa handcrafts, but we do know that Clara passes away in 1955, so that may have ended their operations. Back to Mr. Brigham. Before even graduating from RISD at 21, he joined the Boston Society of Arts and Crafts, where he was elected a craftsman in 1906 and was promoted to a mastership position and elected a medalist in 1935. I found this note on the right particularly interesting. It says, usually abroad when wanted for an order or leaving shortly, designs leave much to the imagination and prices seem high in comparison with other members. As a rule, cannot put designs nor orders through in a rush, too busy. So it seems clear that Brigham wasn't very interested in selling or making designs, especially on somebody else's schedule. Although we don't know exactly which courses William taught in Cleveland and at RISD, we do know that during his tenure at RISD, the Department of Design taught courses in theory of design, modeling, life drawing, and various history of design courses. We can also see that color and pattern are 2 important principles of Brigham's work. And on the right, we have the award for his medalist from the society that I was mentioning earlier, and it says, William E. Brigham, jeweler and teacher, interpreter of difficult problems carried out with skill and completeness worthy of the distinction which this medal implies. Interpreter of difficult problems may seem an unusual thing to say, but in my interpretation, and as we'll see later, much of Brigham's design process was related to problem solving. The study on the left is dated from 1909, so early on in his time at the Cleveland School of Art. It says, demonstration to students in the use of opaque watercolors for making free brush suggestions for pattern design, anything in nature as inspiration. And as we'll see later on, nature was indeed where Brigham found a lot of the inspiration for his work. I also love this little painting that's right here. It's captioned, unknown lady in park, eventually Mrs. B. So probably a little painting of his wife, Clara, or a little pattern of his wife, Clara, I should say. On the right, we have a study of repeated images titled Harmony of Tones, probably an example of something that Brigham created for teaching purposes, but one that reinforces his interest in color. And we have some more studies here in color balance and repetition that he created. On the left, he writes, motives in fall, intensity of colors, pattern design possible by repetition. Brigham was known to have lectured widely on the fundamentals of design, both at RISD and after he retired for various arts organizations in the Providence area. And he would always state that whatever the motive, it has the possibilities for development into a pattern, an elaborate pattern, if the fundamentals of design are kept in mind. And these are repetition, sequence, balance, rhythm, and color. He also explored one particular motif over and over again in many different ways, such as he does here with blackbirds in peach trees on a foggy morning, which is a lovely little visual of this pattern in and of itself. And I kind of think that the design on the right reminds me very much of an M.C. Escher design, if you're familiar with that artist. About his inspirations, Brigham once said they are unlimited. Given a seeing eye, imagination, a love of work, and a knowledge of the fundamentals of design, there is no barrier to stop one. Rather, there are limitless fields to explore, including museums, libraries, and the great unbound fields of nature. I often think he would have made an incredible wallpaper designer because of his skills in balancing color and composition, such as in these paintings that you see here. In many of his works, his thought and design process is clearly laid out in front of us. He's testing an image, recording colors, and making notes about the design. And something like this design on the left may have been made or may have been part of his process of creating something like the full painting on the right. With a lot of his designs, he was thinking about how they would translate directly into objects. So for instance, on this page, he notes that this design could have been a border for a painted plate, dress trimmings, a stencil shade, or for a bag. And here we have examples of painting with his little color chart here, and the 8 colors in effect. And over here we have 9 colors in effect. I won't pretend to know the terminology for what this is called, but just another example of how he's breaking down his process of design. Bolstered by Clara's family fortune, the Brighams traveled widely throughout Europe. Owing to his interest in nature, we have many paintings and sketches of birds at the London Zoo that William captured in 1914. And the London Zoo is actually the world's oldest scientific zoo, which opened in 1828. By far, one of my favorite examples of design and process that's on view in Works in Process is this series right here. And we have 3 works in which you can see Brigham's inspiration, from what is a blue and gold macaw on the left, to his thinking about color, pattern, and repetition with birds, leaves, flowers, and its environment in the center, to finally this wonderful design for a pendant that you see here, showing a bird in its habitat, sitting on a perch made up of those flowers and vines, all with different colored gemstones. I also just absolutely love his jewelry drawings, and you can imagine all of the shiny and colorful gems that would have gone into making any one of these pieces. And to his love of birds, again, we have another pendant right here incorporating parrots. And we also have 2 designs here for peacocks, which appear quite often in his other jewelry drawings that we'll see later. Another pairing from Works in Process is this one. He's taken sketches of pheasants at the zoo, and he's placed one in the bejeweled environment on the right with silver, enamels, gems, and an agate bowl. And we don't know if this object or any of the objects from his design drawings were ever made, but judging by the argosy, which we saw earlier, we know that Brigham was more than capable of producing such a thing. I just wanted to throw in 2 additional designs of birds. On the left, we have a candle shade with a very similar parrot design. And on the right is a box. And this is a really extra box in which William was envisioning gilded silver on a black onyx base with even more enamel and gemstones. In addition to London, the Brighams could also be found in Italy, as evidenced by an array of sketches that William made in places such as Rome and Florence. It's really incredible that we have Brigham's sketchbooks because they're a fantastic record of where he traveled and when, the types of pieces that captivated him, and what he was inspired by and continued to think about long after he returned home. In his sketchbook, which you can see here on the left, he notes visiting the Castellani collection in Rome, which I believe would have been the famous Castellani jewelry shop that was located in the piazza near the Trevi Fountain in Rome, as Brigham notes at the top of his sketch page. By that time in the early 20th century, the business was being run by Alessandro and Augusto, sons of the original founder Fortunato Pio Castellani, who continued to oversee the production of jewelry, such as this brooch on the right, which is in the RISD Museum's collection, that were made in the style of ancient works. As a jeweler and metalsmith, Brigham was fascinated not only by the jewelry designs, but also the method of construction, which is evident in this little sketch that you see here on the bottom. And he's talking here about the process for which the Castellani jewelry pieces are set from the back. So really interested in these technical aspects. Brigham's sketches, lacking any colored graphite, are always religiously annotated with the material and the techniques that were used in the piece. And we'll see why that was important in just a bit. In Florence at the Uffizi, Brigham found inspiration in paintings and was captivated by this altarpiece painted by Flemish artist Hugo van der Goes, particularly the jewelry worn by a young girl, which you see here. And although this is a painting and he's not seeing a physical jewelry piece in person and the types of materials that it would have been made out of, he's looking at this necklace here and making notes as to what he thinks that they are: sapphire, ruby, and pearls with gold. As I previously mentioned, Brigham only used pencil in his sketchbooks, but he diligently recorded materials and colors in order to create full presentation drawings like the one on the right once he returned to his studio. And I'm especially appreciative to him for letting us know where he saw this object, because it allowed me to look it up online, thanks to the magic of the internet, and find it at the Louvre. And I love that we can see an object like this and think about how he found inspiration in this over 100 years ago in France. And I don't think he did such a bad job recreating the color in his presentation drawing from the original object. And here are a few other examples of works that Brigham created from his sketchbook drawings. Again, we have an incredibly detailed ship with little people aboard. This one has so many notes about colors, patterns for enamel, and different stones used throughout it from the drawing on the left. And I really wish we knew where this was from. I think this looks like it would be an incredible object to see. And another jewelry piece, this is noted as one of the many jeweled ornaments on a pearl encrusted copa. And I hope I'm saying that right. This was something he saw in Girgenti, Sicily. And we know that the name of the town changed to Agrigento in 1927. So that helps us date this drawing just a bit, as quite a few of his drawings in his sketchbook are not dated. A copa is a liturgical vestment or robe that is worn by any rank of a clergy member, and historically were highly ornamental, so finely embroidered, covered with jewels such as this. So here we see Brigham finding inspiration in garments. And I just had to include this. We don't know where this piece, where he saw this piece, but he did an absolutely exquisite rendering of this object that's a vase with flowers, exquisitely enameled. This must have been incredible to see in person, and something that inspired him after his travels. The Brighams had no children, and when William died in 1962, after Clara had already passed away, the majority of artwork still in his possession, both his own art and his art collections, were bequeathed to the RISD Museum. We have dozens of design drawings, a few dozen pieces of hollowware and flatware, and a number of jewelry pieces. Most of the small metalwork objects that we do have by Brigham are actually on view in the RISD Museum and can be seen in our silver gallery on the second floor of Pendleton House. We don't have a lot of Brigham's own jewelry, but we do have a few pieces, such as this necklace that you see here on the right. And this was inspired by Indian jewelry and a design drawing that goes along with it on the left. And here he's labeled the drawing "Pendants Suggested by Indian Jewelry, Problems in Red and Green Balance" from 1917. And I've seen this word problems come up before on his other drawings. And again, he's thinking about balance. So this is really a drawing where he's working out his ideas and his inspirations. He's seeing these Indian pieces of jewelry and he's thinking about incorporating green and red into them and how best to do that. We also have a very small brooch that is hand forged of silver with gems. A very simple little design drawing that's very close to what Brigham ended up creating as a finished product. We have a little monogram brooch, and we have many examples of Brigham playing with letters and monograms. And then we have this wonderful necklace. This is one of my favorite pieces that he made. Also looks very much inspired by the Indian jewelry pieces, and here it seems that he found his optimal color balance of green and red. We also have photographs that Brigham may have taken himself or had taken of other jewelry pieces that he made, but their whereabouts are unfortunately unknown. They look quite similar to design drawings that we have on the right, which were done in the 1950s. So these were probably some of the last jewelry pieces that he was creating. And just a few more examples of those pieces here. This wonderful necklace that we don't know where it is. I also want to include a few more jewelry design drawings. They're just so wonderful. We have so many great jewelry drawings from him that it was really hard to choose, but I love the drawings on the left. These are jewelry pieces that he saw in the Louvre and at the Pitti Palace in Florence. And on this right, we have this chicken and an egg set, which is just so fun. And normally when you think about major museums in Europe, you think about the important paintings and sculptures in their collections. I don't personally, I think about the decorative arts, but when most people think about the Louvre, they think about, paintings by Da Vinci. And I love that we have this record from Brigham of these jewelry pieces that he saw and were inspired by, and things that most people probably simply looked over when they were there. We have more inspiration from birds. This is a drawing. The drawing on the right was inspired by jewelry that he saw in London at what was then known as the India Museum. And this was founded in relation to the East India Company and was started back in 1801 to exhibit objects that were being brought back from England, being brought back to England from India. This museum dissolved in 1879 and its contents were transferred to other institutions such as the Victoria and Albert Museum and the British Museum. But again, I was able to find one of the pieces that Brigham saw, and it was this head ornament, which is now in the Victoria and Albert Museum. And again, I think it's so incredible to be able to connect the object with the design drawing that Brigham made over 100 years ago. And also through the preparation of doing research for this talk, now we know where some of these objects exist that he saw, so we can connect them to things in our collection. A few more jewelry design drawing pieces. Again, we have this peacock here, wonderful design. And then this looks like something out of Brigham's harmony of tones studies that we saw in the very beginning. Up until now, we've been looking at a lot of jewelry pieces, but of course, Brigham was also a metalsmith and designed and produced more than just jewelry. This is a close-up image of the first photo that I showed of Brigham, and these are several pieces in the case, almost all of which are on view in our silver gallery at the museum. And in our collection of design drawings, he also created a lot of small objects such as frames, and we have one of those examples here in the collection. I don't know who this image is, if it's actually William's wife, Clara, or some other family member or friend, But since all of these objects came from Brigham's estate, we think it probably was a family or friend, somebody that they knew. We have also a variety of flatware pieces in the collection that he made, with handles made out of or decorated with gems and stones, primarily spoons, but a few of these very sharp weapon-looking knives, and also some lovely spoons that he created. And we have candlesticks planned out with full technical drawings. And this photo on the right, this was another one of Brigham's photos that he took of his objects, but those are all in our collection. And then a few more very elaborate little objects. The piece on the left is a perfume bottle that is made of a V-shaped piece of quartz. We have a carved carnelian elephant and stopper, pearls, green quartz, gold, and enamel on a black onyx base. And this is only 6 inches tall. So a very exquisite little object. And I would be remiss if I didn't share the object on the right, which is owned by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. This is believed to have descended through the Brigham's family. And since William and Clara didn't have children, this probably either was a part of William's brothers or sisters' families or Clara's brother's family. It was sold at auction in 2006 and made its way to the Met through donation in 2011. So it's possible that there are more Brigham objects out there, but this is the only one that I've ever seen so far outside of our collections. In addition to his teaching drawings, Brigham's archive gives us a small glimpse into his social life in Providence, which included his involvement in the Providence Art Club, which he joined as a member in 1914. I was intrigued when I came upon this drawing, and I asked Michael about the Providence Art Club Friday nights, which appeared to be a group of artists, all men, drinking beer. And that's most likely what this group was about. In this sketch, Brigham notes several other artists that were part of the art club, or part of the Friday nights, I should say. We have Anthony Dyer, also known as H. Anthony Dyer, Henry Schoenhart, whose name Brigham spells incorrectly in his drawing, maybe the result of one too many beers, Sidney Burley, who is shown here on the left, drinking a beer, and Milton Halliday, who unfortunately there seems to be little to no information about him. And thank you also to Michael for providing the official song of the Friday nights, recorded in the Providence Art Club history books. I will not try to sing it for you tonight. I'm not sure I could do it justice, but we have that here. And in addition to drinking beer, the group did seem to host some functional activities, such as annual Christmas theatricals, bi-weekly speakers, and dances. Although I'm not sure what artist stunt night was, it probably involved some art making and of course beer drinking, as Brigham has been sure to label this object that is repeated throughout the drawing as a mug of beer for us, so that there's no confusion. We have this painting, which is presumably from artist stunt nights. And this is one of the artists Brigham mentions, Anthony Dyer. This says Anthony paints Venetian purple sails. And then we have a series of sketches by Brigham, presumably from that artist stunt nights. And this looks like it was inspired by a dinner at the art club, as he notes on the left, lamb chops and spaghetti, blue and white china, rolls and butter, pie plus coffee, and a red and white tablecloth. And on the right, you can see Brigham has noted a simple motive has many facets or possibilities. And indeed it does, because Brigham seems to have explored his delicious dinner in several more sketches that we have at the museum. So it must have been a very memorable dinner. And this is a table that is at the art club. We believe it was designed by Sidney Burley, one of the men with the beer mugs. And into the top of the table is carved the words Friday nights. So another commemoration of this group at the art club. And it has all of its members carved into it. It's a little hard to see, but I've noted Brigham's name right in the center. And the culinary inspiration continues. Here we have a design based on boarding house food, and next to it is blueberry pie mouth. So further evidence that Brigham really did find inspiration everywhere. I've included the next couple images to show another facet of Brigham's artistic interest. And here we have a suggested setting for a Harlequin ball, which looks like it would have been a very fun event to attend. We know that when Brigham was in Cleveland, he designed theater sets and costumes. And I found this design drawing that we have for an undersea party, which looks very elaborate with a shipwreck in the center and all. And Brigham even created a set of very fanciful costumes for the occasion. We have a jellyfish and 2 mermaids. And this definitely looks like a party that I would be interested in joining. In addition to his own work, the Brigham's estate included art and objects that William and Clara collected over the course of their travels. And I just wanted to show a few examples here. They had a lot of paintings, ceramic, glass, and many, many textiles, owing particularly to Clara's interest in textile design. And of course, we have a number of pieces of historic jewelry that Brigham collected, and these likely served as inspiration for his own artistic practice. And these could have been even pieces that Clara wore herself, which are now part of the RISD Museum's collection. And these have really inspired my own research into our jewelry collection and jewelry history more broadly. And I just want to end here with this image. We have so many sketches from Brigham, but we also have this archive of newspaper clippings, photographs. They look like book pages, a whole range of things that really illustrate his variety of interests in art and design. And although most of us aren't traveling right now, really inspires me to get out and see some new things. So I'm going to end my talk here and be happy to answer some additional questions.
Thank you so much, Emily. That was so fascinating. I was really enjoying, I'm texting my coworker, Bree, right now, and neither of us really knew anything about Brigham. I mean, being someone who was so involved in the Friday nights and clearly was very active at the art club, and I was not aware of his work really at all. So learning a lot more about his background is really fascinating. And also learning about the extent of why their house over on Blackstone Boulevard is so enormous and grand, and it's quite interesting. So I have a few questions. If anyone has a question that they weren't able to put in the chat yet, please feel free to put it in the chat. The first question in the chat was, will the recording be available afterwards? Absolutely. I will email this recording to all of you, and we'll also have it on our YouTube page later on. So you said at the beginning of this, Emily, that Brigham isn't super well known outside of Rhode Island or even outside of Providence. For you as a curator, how difficult is it to find information on an artist like Brigham, and what resources do you use when you're researching?
That's a good question. And I would say the majority of information that I have about Brigham, especially about himself as an artist and his working process, were really just things that I gleaned from working at the amount of archival information and technical drawings that we have at the museum. It's really unusual when we have so much material from one artist and such a variety of material from someone who was both an educator and an artist. And it's really wonderful to get to look through all of those sketches and things that we have at the museum. I think to me, they paint a really wonderful portrait of his working practice and the things that he was inspired by. I've also relied on some other people in the field, librarians, archivists, to try to dig up some information about William and Clara. I contacted a lot of people in Cleveland to try to find information about her. I was really surprised that there wasn't more information about them, because they, of course, were a couple with quite a lot of money, and they seemed to spend a lot of time traveling and doing very social things. There are lots of social society reports in Cleveland of the two of them when they came back, going to parties. It seemed like it was quite an event when they were in town. So I was surprised that there weren't more articles or things about them, but I think there's little articles about them participating in events around Providence, being part of garden clubs and things like that. So little by little, throughout my research, I'm kind of painting a better picture of the two of their lives, and it's still an ongoing process.
That's great. So much original research going into really retelling the story of someone who has in some ways been a little bit lost to history. Another question was, would someone like Brigham, because of how small some of these pieces are, is there evidence of him, like what sort of specialized tools would he have, or would he have even designed his own tools to do some of that really fine metalwork that he was doing?
That's such a great question, and I wish that I knew. I wish I knew what his studio looked like. From some evidence that I found in the Providence Journal archives, it seemed that he had his own studio that was separate from his home studio villa handcraft complex, that he probably worked away from everybody else. But I wish I knew what that process looked like. I wish they had taken even more photos of his like physical working process.
Were you able to find any examples of his wife's textile work in any museum collections or anything like that, or are those things sort of more obscure as well?
No, I haven't found anything. Although interestingly enough, that slide that I showed from the Boston Society of Arts and Crafts that talks about William's work being too expensive, I also found a similar note from the Arts and Crafts Society that talks about Clara's work and how her textiles are also too expensive. So I think the two of them probably just went above and beyond in creating the most time-intensive, elaborate things that they could, and maybe they weren't things that really sold. But I wish I knew where her textiles were. Maybe there are some examples in other institutions around Providence that I just haven't found yet.
That's really interesting. I think the notes on their sort of relationship with the marketplace were also really interesting. Are you aware of any other artists who had that sort of ability to make things just for their own sake, really, and who weren't really making for a market? Or were a lot of the artists making jewelry and things like that in this period more market focused than someone like Brigham?
I would say definitely the latter. Brigham's case is kind of unusual. Most artists do not have the opportunity to marry into money, or at least that kind of money, and are really working hard and putting a lot of effort into selling their work and making work that's, I wouldn't say Brigham's work wasn't appropriate for the market, but certainly it was probably very high priced for the time that he was creating them. And some of those pieces that he was making, the really elaborate ones, he was doing in the 1920s. So I don't know exactly how much they would have cost back then, but probably more than a lot of people wanted to pay. So I would say his is definitely an unusual example.
Another question regarding sort of his pattern making and stuff like that is Did you find any evidence that he was involved like in the theater community in Providence at all? Or, he was doing some of those stage sets, and we talked about this, may have been even for some of the theatricals that they did at the art club, but was there any evidence of him being involved in other organizations in Providence?
I I think he was, but I'm not specifically remembering any. I know Clara was involved in, I don't know. I mean, clearly they had a lot of time on their hands. It's like Clara was involved in 5 or 6 different organizations, and I think Brigham was as well. He was teaching at RISD until the late 20s, so maybe he had a little bit less time for working with these different organizations. But I do know when he was in Cleveland, he played quite a big role in the school and different aspects of their school, and designed a lot of theater sets for the Cleveland Institute of Arts, theatrical production specifically. But I'm not sure about Providence.
Really fascinating. Let's see, what other questions do I have? Another question was in terms of when you were talking about his travels and him drawing from paintings that he was seeing and even like identifying the different types of gems and things, is that something that you see in other artists or in other jewelry designers? Do they take those sort of copious type of notes on things like that? Have you seen other artists who tend to do that?
I haven't, but I think that's probably because I'm still at the very beginning of exploring a lot of process for other jewelry designers and how they work. I think jewelry designers in particular make the most incredible detailed drawings. I mean, they're thinking on a very microscopic level of design and also of color. And material, which is really incredible. I think probably some of that process is owed to him being a jeweler and being very detail oriented.
Very cool. Most of the comments in the chat are just thank you, Emily, great presentation, thank you, from a bunch of people put that in. Another question though was how much of his work and collection are on exhibit in the museum now? How many of them are publicly available?
So everything that I showed the photograph of the case and some of the colored photography that we have of those images. I think we have maybe 6 or 7 hollowware pieces that are on view at the RISD Museum. We have a little silver gallery in the section called Pendleton House. If any of you have been to the RISD Museum, I see some names I'm quite familiar with, so I know some of you have. Those are on view there. We have a small exhibition called A Changing Reflection, and it's really metalwork through the 20th and 21st century. So we have some early examples of metalwork from the 20th century from Brigham, illustrating traditional metalsmithing techniques. And then of course we have the 2 sets of works that I showed in works in process. So those are on view right now until January. And works on paper definitely have a very specific life when it comes to being on view. So we can't show them too long, but fortunately we have lots and lots of wonderful design drawings by Brigham that I'm hoping to get on view in the future.
Very cool. You mentioned about the piece that was in the collection of the Met and that it had come from a recent purchase. Do Brigham's works come up at auction, or are they on the market pretty regularly, or are they more rare on the market?
That's the only piece that I have ever seen that has been sold. And there's a pretty thorough database of auction records going back at least 20 or more years, and that's the only piece I've ever seen come up for sale. So I would love to know more about that. I'm not even sure the Met knows who exactly in the family that came from, or how it got to auction, but it is a very curious piece because that, along with the Argosy and the little perfume bottle, are 3 of the probably more well-known or publicized objects that he made, because those 3 were so shown in the triennial at the Boston Society of Arts and Crafts. I can't remember when that was, in the 20s, I think. So those are the three of his most well-known objects. So it's interesting that we have a record of that little amethyst jar, and that made it into another public collection.
Interesting. Does anyone else have any questions for Emily before we close out tonight? Please put them in the chat if you have any other ones. One other question that I had in my inbox was, for these objects, how intensive is it in terms of taking care of them, and what kind of conservation do they require to keep these, especially the jewelry pieces, in good condition?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say we have very good storage at the museum, very climate controlled, humidity controlled storage. So all the metalwork pieces, whether they're living in storage or they're on view, are living in a pretty stable environment. Of course, when we put metalworks on view, specifically silver, we do try to polish them before they go on view so they can look their best. And the works on paper as well really came in, all of these objects came in the early 60s, and there hasn't been a lot of use of the works on paper. So I would say those probably came in as Brigham drew them. They're not perfect. You know, what you would think of as museum quality drawings, a lot of them were working drawings and sketches. So they have, you know, smudges and you know, little notations on them. Some of them are ripped and pasted together. So they're not in the best condition, but I would say that those are things that we wouldn't necessarily want to conserve to make them look perfect, because we want to think of them as how Brigham used them, or how he created and used them.
That's great. Well, thank you. Thank you again. Bree put in the chat that she wishes he made wallpaper, because clearly he was very good at pattern making. So that's a loss for all of us. And then a couple more thank yous. So thank you again, Emily. Really, really interesting talk about this historical art club member. And again, if you're local, please go over to the RISD Museum, just in general for obvious reasons, but also for this wonderful show. It's up on the top floor in the print room. So please go see it. So do you have any other projects coming up that you'd like to share with everyone, Emily? Is there anything that they should look forward to that you're working on at RISD?
Oh, well, we're always working on new things. We received a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities recently, which we're really excited about. That's going to provide funds for us to do some much needed preservation for our historic wallpaper collection. So if you're on Instagram, please follow me at Deck Arts Curator. I post constantly about our wallpaper collection. We have one of the most incredible collections of 18th and 19th century French wallpapers, and we are going to be doing things like cleaning and rehousing them properly, and cleaning up that storage area a lot. So that will make things more organized, more accessible, and more safer for the collection. So that's going to be a big project this fall that Brianna is also helping with. So yeah, you'll see a lot of that from us.
That's great. Well, thanks again. Really wonderful talk. Thank you to everyone for being with us, and keep an eye out for our upcoming lectures. We'll have hopefully one of these free PAC lectures every month going forward. So look forward to seeing you again. Thanks again, Emily. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.